What's up, everybody? Brady Figuel here, coming at you with a album review for the new Swept to Sea album, Lost Shores, that was released this past Friday, January 24th. Before I get into the review, I want to give a quick shout out to Aaron and his channel Among the Fence. He is the reason I actually discovered this album. He does New Music Friday videos where he talks about new albums that are going to be released on that Friday, obviously, and new singles. I've discovered a lot of new music from his channel and those videos that he does, so definitely check his channel out. So let's get right into this review. This is actually this band's debut album. They're a four-piece metalcore band from San Francisco who very clearly take influence from early 2000s metalcore. The most prominent influences to my ear are As I Lay Dying, most notably, also August Burns Red, Parkway Drive. With the overall absence of huge, clean vocal choruses like a band like Killswitch Engage might have done, those bands that I mentioned really take up most of the influence on this album, at least, again, to my ear. But that's not always the case, as we will get into. And them having this particular sound that they go for with this album, it has its benefits and has its drawbacks. A drawback that really is the case for any album that takes clear influence from a specific time period, specific bands, is that it doesn't fully have like an identity. In particular, the songs at the way beginning of the record and the way end of the record, I don't really find to be the more memorable tracks on here. The opening track, Exit Interview, is actually pretty cool. It takes a lot more just from like straight up hardcore with its more percussive styles of riffing. Also the use of more like open power chords and just the overall meanness of the song. It's more the next two tracks, Salvation and False Affections, that just... This kind of just sounds like As I Lay Dying Light. Like, with these songs, rather than them making me want to keep listening to the album, they more make me want to re-listen to Shadows of Security or Ocean Between Us. They're not, like, total duds. Like, False Affection does have that kind of, like, bendy verse riff that I thought was cool. But overall, they just didn't really do enough with these two tracks to make them really stand out. And I'm going to say the same thing about the last two tracks on here, Who We Are, and I think it's Verterunt ad Mare. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Verterunt ad Mare. I'm not sure what that means. It's got to be in some other language. Again, just while these aren't bad songs, I just don't feel like they add anything to the album, or especially add anything to the overall metalcore sound. These four tracks I've singled out, they don't really have any out-of-the-box musical ideas or any like prominent, like unorthodox emotions, especially in the metalcore genre. So, like, while the bookends of the album are the weakest points, one benefit of that is that it protects the real meat of the album, and it still makes this a pretty cohesive listen when you're listening to it track by track. Like, track 4, Testament of Hate, is actually one of my favorite tracks on it, even though, like, the first time I heard it, I thought those, like, transmission vocals were a little bit corny. But the actual music on this song and the vocals that come in later in the track are fucking killer. The song has some of the catchiest, bendiest, grooviest riffing on the whole album. Also some real powerful drums that play off of the song's time signature, given that it's in that fast 6/8 triplet-driven timing. And the overall mood of this song is really menacing and real dramatic. And even though that random mid-album interlude Loss comes in, which doesn't really serve much of a purpose, it's followed by one of my other favorite tracks on here, The Echoes of Goodbye. And this song is maybe the clearest example of them really switching things up stylistically on this album. Not like by a ton, but just compared to the overall metalcore influence on this album, this song just screams Insomnium to me, who are one of my personal favorite bands as far as the melodic death metal genre goes. Whether it's that bendy guitar lick in the intro that also reappears later in the song, or those really like echoey group vocals that almost bring like Viking metal to mind a little bit, that's very familiar as an Insomnium fan. And in both of those specific parts, but in the overall song, just the melodies exhibited here are just very Insomnium and very melodic death metal. So it was really cool seeing them switch things up a little bit into the album. And although the lyrics of this song do get a little bit vague, I do love the overall message of it. And there are some really cool lyrics in here as well. My favorite lyric on the record has got to be when he says, "All I need is one last look in your eyes to rebuild all that was taken." The track Shattered Glass that comes next is another favorite of mine. This song just overall in its mood is a lot more just dismal and dark as opposed to the more just straightforward, harmonized riffing, metalcore style of riffing that we've seen on a lot of the tracks so far. I especially love that opening chord progression. It takes a little bit again from more of the melodic death metal genre, just in its overall style and in its overall mood, because melodic death metal can sometimes be some of the darkest, most dismal music in metal. Although this track does have those chunky, more hardcore, metalcore-esque rhythm guitars punching their way through this track. I also love those tremolo riffs that kick in at about the 240 mark, just the overall dark melody they have yet again. And once again, it definitely amps up the extreme metal influence in this song and the album. The track Nowhere to Run kicks off with one of the best riffs on the album, just really techy, and then those vocals when they kick in are some of the most shrieky, high-esque screams on the whole album, and they sound awesome. At about the 155 mark in this song too, we get one of the most emotive guitar solos on the record, which I also thought was pretty refreshing, as the solos, at least up until this point on the album, didn't really feel like they added a whole lot, but the one on this song definitely does. And then the song Trapped in Memories kicks off with not really clean guitars, but some less distorted guitars that also have more of like a dissonant melody to them, as opposed to, again, more of the cleaner sounding melodies so far. I do think this song is another one of the highlights, just full of energy. The thing that kind of turns me off a little bit about this song is those like Linkin Park vocals. When he's kind of just talking like this over the music, that didn't really do it for me. I feel like they should have just kept it going with the very versatile screams. This album has a good thing going by not having clean vocals. Like, not that clean vocals ruin metalcore, but I just don't think this album needs them. And those vocals on this song are an unfortunate element of reassurance that they really don't need them. But again, I do appreciate kind of how this song is the clear, like, most melodic, most, I guess maybe most emotional track on the record. So it does at least add something new to the record, as opposed to the filler tracks that I was talking about earlier. Overall, though, I mean, for this band's debut album, like, this is a pretty good effort. Production-wise and sonically, I pretty much have nothing but compliments. This record just sounds like a really perfect balance between modern, maybe slightly polished, and still like old school early 2000s. The mixing and the mastering were done very well, and everything sounds really balanced. Whatever like added production layers or sound effects that were added in, all definitely did feel like they at least added something to the song. Like I mentioned earlier, those transmission vocals on Testament of Hate, even though they turned me off like at first, it actually does really make this song stand out. Also, those sirens on Nowhere to Run, which do give the song a bit of like an apocalyptic feel, and I'm not sure that the rest of the song really follows in that vein, but it definitely did. It was something different on this album, made it stand out, and it still sounded good. The vocal performance on this record too is phenomenal. The vocals on here are versatile. They don't get too repetitive. Repetition is usually a running criticism I have of especially metalcore albums that are fully screamed, but not on this record. The vocalist of this band does a great job of using his high screams when they fit best, using his lower screams when they fit best, and also production-wise, a lot of the vocal layering on this album makes them sound a lot more full and powerful and emphasize the parts that they were meant to emphasize. So even though it does get a little bit paint by numbers and a little bit drab at times, this is still a pretty strong start for this band, and I'm definitely going to be following them and awaiting what they put out next. For all those reasons, I'm going to score this album a 19 out of 30. As always, thank you guys very much for watching. Definitely hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more rock and metal album reviews. Also, let me know your thoughts on this album below. If you've heard it, I definitely want to hear what you think of, and if you haven't heard it, I'd still recommend checking them out, especially if you're a metalcore fan and like an early 2000s metalcore fan like me. And that's about all I have for you guys for this video, so thank you again for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.